The cardboard box hit my chest with a dull thud as my father's voice shattered everything I thought I knew about family. "You're no longer my son," Robert screamed, his face red with fury I had never seen before. The contents of my desk scattered across the concrete floor of our construction company office. 5 years of building this business together, and now Derek stood behind Dad, watching with cold satisfaction as I stumbled backward. "Get out," Dad continued, his voice cracking. "I trusted you, and you betrayed everything we built." I couldn't breathe, couldn't understand what was happening, couldn't comprehend how my entire world had just collapsed in 30 seconds. My name is Mike, and until 3 weeks ago, I believed family meant everything. Growing up in Millfield, Colorado, I watched my father Robert pour his heart into building a construction company from nothing. When I graduated from business school at 23, joining Dad felt like the natural next step. I learned every aspect of the operation, from reading blueprints to managing client relationships. The early mornings, the calloused hands, the satisfaction of watching families move into homes we had built together. These moments defined who I was. Derek joined us 2 years later, fresh out of trade school with a chip on his shoulder the size of a mountain. At 21, my younger brother possessed undeniable talent with tools and machinery. But he carried resentment like a heavy backpack he refused to set down. While I focused on project management and client relations, Derek preferred working directly with the crews, and I thought our different strengths complemented each other perfectly. Dad always dreamed of expanding beyond residential projects. When the opportunity arose to bid on Sunrise Valley, a housing development worth $3 million, our entire family understood this contract would change everything. Success meant financial security, prestige in our community, and the chance to establish ourselves as a major regional contractor. Failure would leave us struggling to pay our existing crews and maintain our reputation. During the past year, I dedicated countless hours preparing our proposal for Sunrise Valley. I studied comparable projects, negotiated with suppliers for better material costs, and developed relationships with subcontractors who could deliver quality work within our timeline. Dad trusted me completely with these preparations, often telling clients that his son Mike would handle their projects with the same care and attention he would provide himself. Derek's behavior became increasingly erratic during this period. He questioned my decisions during family dinners, suggested I was making the company too dependent on theoretical business school concepts rather than practical construction knowledge, and frequently reminded Dad that he possessed hands-on skills I would never match. I attributed his attitude to stress and sibling rivalry, never imagining the depths of calculation behind his complaints. 3 weeks before the confrontation that destroyed my life, Derek began implementing his carefully planned deception. He approached Dad privately, expressing concerns about my loyalty to the family business. Derek claimed he had overheard phone conversations where I discussed starting my own company using Dad's client contacts. These conversations never happened, but Derek possessed recordings that seemed to support his accusations. Derek had spent months creating fake text message conversations between me and competitors, showing apparent discussions about selling company secrets and undercutting our bids. Using sophisticated photo editing software, he manufactured emails that appeared to show me communicating with rival contractors about stealing the Sunrise Valley contract. Derek even created false bank records suggesting I had been overcharging clients and depositing the excess payments into personal accounts. Dad confronted Derek about these accusations, and my brother skillfully played the role of reluctant whistleblower. Derek expressed heartbreak about having to expose his own brother, but insisted family loyalty, demanded honesty about threats to the business. Derek claimed I had become arrogant and greedy, believing my business education entitled me to cheat hardworking people like Dad, who built everything through honest labor. The morning of my termination, I arrived at the office expecting to review final preparations for our Sunrise Valley presentation. Instead, I found Dad waiting with Derek and a box containing my personal belongings. Dad's hands shook as he held printed copies of Derek's fabricated evidence, his voice breaking as he described feeling betrayed by the son he had trusted most completely. I tried explaining that the evidence was false, but every protest sounded exactly like what a guilty person would say. Derek had prepared responses to every possible defense, creating a narrative so comprehensive that my denials only seemed to confirm Dad's worst fears about my dishonesty. The more desperately I pleaded my innocence, the more convinced Dad became that Derek had saved the family business from my treachery. Walking to my truck that morning, I turned back to see Derek watching from the office window. For just a moment, His expression revealed something that chilled me to the bone. Not grief or disappointment, but satisfaction so pure it looked almost hungry. Derek had orchestrated this destruction with the precision of an architect, and he was admiring his completed masterpiece. But Derek's deception went deeper than I initially realized. While cleaning out my desk under Dad's suspicious glare, I accidentally knocked Derek's laptop off the conference table. The screen flickered to life, displaying photo editing software with one of the fake text conversations still loaded in the workspace. Derek had been so confident in his victory that he forgot to close the program after creating his latest piece of fabricated evidence. The image on the screen showed my phone number attached to messages I had never sent, discussing company secrets with phone numbers I had never contacted. Timestamps indicated Derek had been working on this particular forgery just hours before my termination, fine-tuning the wording to maximize its emotional impact on Dad. The metadata visible in the editing program revealed dozens of similar files, suggesting Derek had been manufacturing evidence against me for months. I tried showing this discovery to Dad, but Derek quickly closed the laptop and claimed I was trying to frame him in a desperate attempt to save myself. Dad, already overwhelmed by what he believed was my betrayal, refused to examine Derek's computer and ordered me to leave immediately. Derek had positioned himself as the honest son protecting the family business, making any evidence I presented look like manipulation by a cornered criminal. Driving away from the construction yard that morning, I realized Derek had not simply told lies about me. He had created an entire alternate reality, where I was the villain and he was the hero, complete with documentation detailed enough to convince a jury. Derek understood that destroying me required more than accusations. It demanded proof so compelling that even people who loved me would have no choice but to believe his version of events. The apartment I had called home for 3 years belonged to the company, and Dad wanted me out within 48 hours. I packed my belongings while neighbors who had known me since childhood watched through their windows, whispering among themselves about Robert's son who had apparently tried to steal from his own family. The shame felt like a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders as I loaded boxes into my truck under their judgmental stares. Jessica, my girlfriend of 2 years, initially supported me when I explained what had happened. She held me while I broke down in her living room, promising we would figure out how to prove my innocence together. But Derek had anticipated this possibility and began planting seeds of doubt about my character throughout our social circle. He approached mutual friends with expressions of genuine concern, sharing carefully edited versions of the evidence that portrayed me as someone who had fooled everyone, including Jessica. Within a week, Jessica began asking uncomfortable questions about financial details she had never cared about before. Derek had suggested I might have been living beyond my means, using stolen money to pay for dinners and gifts I could never afford on my actual salary. Jessica started examining our relationship through this new lens, wondering if her feelings for me were based on deception rather than genuine connection. My mother Patricia found herself caught between her sons, unsure how to process the evidence Derek had shown her, while unable to completely abandon the child she had raised for 25 years. Patricia had always been proud of my academic achievements and professional success, but Derek skillfully reframed these accomplishments as signs of entitlement and dishonesty. He suggested my business education had taught me to view people like Dad as obstacles to overcome rather than family members to respect. The hardware store job represented my only option for immediate income, since word of my supposed betrayal had spread throughout the local construction community. Bill Thompson, the store owner, hired me despite knowing about the accusations, claiming everyone deserved a chance to prove themselves through honest work. The 20% pay reduction from my previous salary meant moving into a studio apartment on the rough side of town, but at least I could maintain basic independence while searching for ways to clear my name. Derek wasted no time consolidating his newfound position within the company. Dad promoted him to project manager, giving him access to client relationships and financial decisions I had previously handled. Derek accepted these responsibilities with apparent reluctance, telling Dad he never wanted to gain advancement through his brother's downfall but felt obligated to help the family business recover from my betrayal. This false humility made Derek appear noble while reinforcing Dad's belief that I had been unworthy of the trust placed in me. Our former clients received carefully crafted explanations from Derek about my departure, each conversation designed to protect the company's reputation, while ensuring I could never return to the construction industry in our region. Hello. I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. My attempts to explain the truth to former friends and colleagues met with polite skepticism or outright hostility. Derek had done his groundwork thoroughly, sharing just enough evidence to make his accusations appear credible without revealing the full scope of his manipulation. People who had known me for years began questioning their own judgment, wondering how they had failed to notice signs of the greed and dishonesty Derek described so convincingly. Working at the hardware store brought unexpected lessons about human nature and community dynamics. Customers who recognized me from my previous life treated me with mixture of pity and suspicion, some offering uncomfortable sympathy, while others made pointed comments about family loyalty and personal responsibility. These interactions reminded me daily that Derek had not simply damaged my relationship with Dad. He had systematically destroyed my reputation throughout the entire community where I had planned to build my future. 3 months after my termination, I discovered Derek's next level of deception while emptying trash outside his apartment building. Among the discarded papers, I found receipts showing Derek had been selling company materials to independent contractors at significant markups, pocketing the profits while recording the transactions as legitimate business expenses. The receipts bore his signature and detailed descriptions of items that should have been used on our current projects. I approached Dad with this evidence, hoping to finally prove Derek was the actual thief in our family. But Derek had prepared for this possibility by telling Dad I might attempt to frame him out of desperation and revenge. Derek claimed he had suspected I might try manufacturing evidence against him, and he suggested my discovery of the receipts proved I had been monitoring his activities in stalker-like behavior that demonstrated my unstable mental condition. Dad refused to examine the receipts seriously, instead expressing concern about my apparent inability to accept responsibility for my actions and move forward with my life. Derek reinforced this interpretation by suggesting I needed professional help to deal with my anger and resentment about facing consequences for my choices. Patricia agreed with this assessment, and together they decided any further contact between me and the family should be limited until I demonstrated genuine remorse for my betrayal. The isolation became suffocating as Derek systematically eliminated every avenue of support and vindication I had previously counted on. He had not simply told lies about me. He had created a comprehensive alternate reality that explained away any evidence I might present while positioning himself as the victim of my ongoing harassment. Derek understood that destroying someone completely required controlling not just what people believed about past events, but how they interpreted future actions as well. Standing alone in my studio apartment that night, surrounded by boxes I had never bothered unpacking, I realized Derek had trapped me in a maze of his own design. Every path I could see led back to dead ends he had constructed. Every piece of evidence I discovered had been anticipated and neutralized before I found it. Derek had not simply stolen my job and destroyed my relationships. He had stolen my identity and replaced it with a carefully crafted fiction that served his purposes. But Derek had made one critical error in his planning. His greed was beginning to exceed his caution, and the receipts I had found represented just the beginning of financial crimes that would ultimately expose his true nature to everyone he had manipulated. My father fired me after believing my brother's lies. Part 1. The Hook. The cardboard box hit my chest with a dull thud as my father's voice shattered everything I thought I knew about family. "You're no longer my son," Robert screamed, his face red with fury I had never seen before. The contents of my desk scattered across the concrete floor of our construction company office. 5 years of building this business together. And now Derek stood behind Dad, watching with cold satisfaction as I stumbled backward. "Get out," Dad continued, his voice cracking. "I trusted you. And you betrayed everything we built. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't understand what was happening. Couldn't comprehend how my entire world had just collapsed in 30 seconds. Part 2. The Setup and First Betrayal. Part 4. The Deeper Conspiracy. 3 months of exile had worn me down to someone I barely recognized. The confident project manager who had once coordinated million-dollar construction projects now struggled to afford groceries and basic necessities. My savings were nearly depleted, my credit cards approaching their limits, and my prospects for finding better employment remained non-existent, as long as Derek's version of events dominated local perceptions about my character and reliability. Jessica finally ended our relationship during a painful conversation where she admitted she could no longer distinguish between the person she had fallen in love with and the manipulative criminal Derek had described so convincingly. She returned the engagement ring I had given her 6 months earlier. Explaining that our future plans had been based on financial stability I had apparently achieved through deception. Watching her walk away felt like losing another piece of my former life. Another connection Derek had successfully severed through his methodical campaign of character assassination. Patricia stopped returning my phone calls entirely after Derek convinced her that my continued contact was preventing the family from healing and moving forward. Derek suggested my calls were attempts at emotional manipulation designed to create guilt and division rather than genuine efforts to repair our relationships. He pointed out that truly remorseful people accepted consequences for their actions without constantly trying to shift blame or maintain control over family members they had wronged. Dad went further, removing me from the family health insurance plan and officially changing the company emergency contact information to reflect Derek as his primary son and business heir. These administrative changes carried symbolic weight that cut deeper than their practical impact, representing formal acknowledgement that I no longer existed within the family structure I had helped build and maintain throughout my adult life. Derek capitalized on my absence by positioning himself as the son who had always been more committed to the family business than personal ambition. He worked longer hours than necessary, arriving early and staying late to demonstrate dedication that contrasted sharply with what he described as my previous entitlement and corner cutting. Dad began praising Derek's work ethic in conversations with clients, explaining how his younger son possessed the authentic commitment to craftsmanship and customer service that defined their company's values. The Sunrise Valley contract became Derek's opportunity to prove himself worthy of Dad's complete trust and confidence. Derek successfully secured the $3 million project by presenting refined versions of the proposals I had developed, taking credit for research and relationship building I had completed during the previous year. Dad celebrated this achievement as evidence that Derek possessed business instincts superior to my academic theories and impractical approaches to client relations. Derek's newfound success enabled him to purchase an expensive truck and update his wardrobe to reflect his enhanced status within the company. He claimed these improvements were funded by salary increases and performance bonuses, but the timeline seemed accelerated compared to normal business growth patterns. Derek also began displaying knowledge about financial matters that exceeded what his trade school background and limited business experience should have provided. Working at the hardware store exposed me to conversations among local contractors who discussed current projects and industry developments. During one particularly revealing exchange, I overheard two suppliers discussing how Derek had approached them months earlier about purchasing materials for personal projects at discounted rates. These suppliers assumed Derek was working on his own home renovation or helping friends with small jobs, not realizing he was systematically stealing from the family company to establish independent income streams. This discovery prompted me to investigate Derek's activities more carefully, using my insider knowledge of construction industry practices to identify potential areas of financial manipulation. I realized Derek's access to company purchasing systems and vendor relationships provided numerous opportunities for the kind of theft the receipts had suggested. Derek could easily create legitimate-looking transactions that diverted materials and funds to personal use, while maintaining plausible explanations for any discrepancies that might surface during routine accounting reviews. I began documenting Derek's pattern of material theft by tracking serial numbers on equipment and supplies that should have been used on specific company projects. By visiting construction sites where our crews were working, and comparing actual materials to purchase orders and delivery records, I discovered systematic discrepancies that suggested ongoing embezzlement on a scale much larger than the isolated receipts had indicated. Derek's system involved creating phantom expenses for legitimate projects, ordering additional materials beyond what was actually needed, and then selling the excess inventory to independent contractors at market prices, while reporting the sales as business expenses or equipment losses. This approach generated substantial personal income, while making his theft appear to be normal business operations with minor inefficiencies, rather than deliberate fraud. My investigation revealed that Derek's embezzlement had been occurring for over a year, beginning long before he fabricated evidence to destroy my reputation and secure my removal from the company. Derek had not targeted me because of personal resentment or sibling rivalry. He had identified me as the primary obstacle to expanding his criminal activities within the family business. My involvement in financial oversight and vendor relationships made his theft risky as long as I remained in a position to discover inconsistencies or ask uncomfortable questions. The fake evidence and character assassination represented Derek's solution to a practical problem rather than emotional revenge against a brother he envied. Derek needed me gone so he could implement larger-scale embezzlement schemes without fear of detection, and he needed Dad to trust him completely so he could gain access to higher-level financial controls and decision-making authority within the company structure. But Derek's most shocking deception was still hidden beneath the surface of what I had already discovered. While examining company bank records I had obtained through legitimate channels, I found evidence that Derek had been forging Dad's signature on checks and redirecting company funds to accounts he controlled secretly. Derek had created an elaborate system of financial fraud that went far beyond selling stolen materials to independent contractors. Derek's ultimate plan was becoming clear as I studied the timeline of his activities and the progression of his access to company resources. Derek intended to embezzle funds from the Sunrise Valley project, potentially leaving the family business bankrupt, and Dad facing criminal charges for fraud. Derek had committed using forged signatures and falsified documentation. Derek had positioned himself to disappear with substantial amounts of stolen money, while Dad took responsibility for crimes he knew nothing about. The realization hit me like a physical blow as I sat in my studio apartment reviewing the evidence I had gathered. Derek had not simply destroyed my life to advance his own career within the family business. Derek was systematically looting the company Dad had spent decades building, and he intended to frame Dad for the theft when the inevitable discovery occurred. Derek's betrayal encompassed not just me, but the entire family and everyone who depended on the business for their livelihood. I now understood that Derek viewed our family relationships as tools to be exploited rather than bonds to be cherished. His expressions of loyalty and dedication were calculated performances designed to maintain access to the resources he was stealing while deflecting suspicion away from his criminal activities. Derek had weaponized Dad's love and trust to facilitate theft on a massive scale, making himself appear to be the devoted son while preparing to destroy everything Dad had worked to achieve. The evidence was compelling, but presenting it to Dad would require overcoming months of conditioning that portrayed me as a desperate liar, willing to say anything to escape responsibility for my own betrayal. Derek had done more than poison Dad against me. He had created a framework that would interpret any accusations I made as further proof of my dishonesty and vindictiveness. Exposing Derek's crimes would require irrefutable proof that even Dad could not dismiss or rationalize away. My hardware store salary barely covered basic living expenses, but I dedicated every spare dollar to building an airtight case against Derek. I contacted Josh Martinez, my former roommate from business school who had become a forensic accountant specializing in white-collar fraud investigations. Josh initially expressed skepticism about family disputes involving construction companies, but his attitude changed completely when I showed him the evidence I had gathered about Derek's systematic embezzlement and document forgery. Josh agreed to help me pro bono after reviewing the financial records and understanding the scope of Derek's criminal enterprise. He explained that the kind of sophisticated fraud Derek was implementing required careful documentation and professional analysis to prove in ways that would withstand legal scrutiny. Josh's forensic accounting expertise provided the credibility my accusations would need to overcome Derek's previous character assassination and Dad's conditioned distrust of my motives. We developed a systematic approach to gathering evidence that would trace Derek's criminal activities from their beginning to their current scope. Josh taught me how to photograph documents properly, maintain chain of custody for evidence, and identify financial patterns that revealed fraudulent transactions. This education transformed my angry desire for vindication into a focused investigation with specific goals and professional methodologies. Derek continued expanding his embezzlement activities as the Sunrise Valley project progressed. Apparently confident that his previous destruction of my credibility had eliminated any threat of exposure, Derek created increasingly elaborate fake subcontractor invoices for work that was never performed, billing the company for services while pocketing the payments through shell companies he controlled. These fraudulent transactions were becoming larger and more frequent as Derek grew bolder in his theft. Josh identified Derek's pattern of rerouting material deliveries to locations where he could sell them privately rather than using them for legitimate company projects. Derek had developed relationships with several independent contractors who purchased materials from him at below-market prices, assuming they were getting deals on surplus inventory rather than participating in theft from a family construction business. These contractors provided documentation that helped us trace Derek's criminal network. Working at the hardware store actually enhanced my investigation by providing natural opportunities to interact with local contractors and suppliers without arousing Derek's suspicion. Bill Thompson, the store owner, became an unwitting ally by sharing industry gossip and information about unusual business practices he had observed among his customers. Bill's 40 years in the construction business gave him instincts about when something seemed questionable, and his observations about Derek's purchasing patterns corroborated evidence Josh and I were developing independently. During this period, I formed an unexpected friendship with Carmen Rodriguez, a single mother who brought her 8-year-old daughter Sophia to the hardware store while shopping for home repair supplies. Carmen possessed no knowledge of my family situation or professional background, which made our conversations refreshingly free from the judgment and suspicion that colored most of my social interactions since Derek's campaign against me. Carmen's genuine kindness reminded me that authentic relationships were possible, even when everything else in my life felt contaminated by Derek's manipulation. Carmen worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and her insights about how people behaved under stress helped me understand Derek's psychology in new ways. She explained that some individuals became addicted to deception itself, finding satisfaction in manipulating others, regardless of the practical benefits their lies provided. Carmen's perspective helped me realize that Derek's crimes were motivated by more than financial gain. He derived psychological pleasure from controlling other people's perceptions and emotions. Josh's analysis revealed that Derek had been stealing from employee pension funds by creating fake administrative expenses and redirecting contributions to accounts he controlled. This discovery was particularly shocking because it meant Derek was not only stealing from the family business, but also from hardworking crew members who trusted Dad to protect their retirement savings. Derek's willingness to victimize employees who depended on the company for their financial security demonstrated a level of callousness that exceeded anything I had previously imagined. The evidence of pension fund theft provided the breakthrough we needed to understand Derek's ultimate strategy. Derek was not planning to embezzle a specific amount of money and disappear. He was systematically looting every available resource while positioning Dad to take legal responsibility for crimes he knew nothing about. Derek had created documentation that would make Dad appear to be the mastermind of an elaborate fraud scheme, with Derek positioned as an innocent victim who discovered his father's crimes and tried to protect the company and its employees. Josh's forensic analysis showed that Derek intended to discover the pension fund theft after stealing the maximum possible amount from the Sunrise Valley contract. Derek would present himself as the honest son who uncovered his father's criminal activities and felt obligated to report them to authorities, despite the personal cost of destroying his own family. This narrative would allow Derek to keep the money he had stolen while appearing to be a hero who chose justice over family loyalty. The sophistication of Derek's plan revealed extensive preparation and research into white-collar crime investigation procedures. Derek understood how forensic accountants would analyze company records, and he had structured his theft to create evidence patterns that would implicate Dad while making his own activities appear legitimate or, at worst, the result of poor oversight rather than deliberate fraud. Derek had studied our case better than we initially studied his. But Derek made one critical error that Josh's expertise helped us identify and exploit. Derek's computer skills, while sufficient for photo editing and document forgery, were inadequate for the sophisticated financial fraud he was attempting. Derek had failed to understand how digital transactions created permanent records that could be traced through multiple systems, and he had left digital fingerprints throughout his criminal network that professional analysis could identify and document. Josh discovered that Derek had used the company credit card for personal purchases by creating fake vendor accounts that corresponded to legitimate business expenses. Derek would submit receipts for construction materials or services, but the payments actually went to shell companies that immediately transferred the funds to Derek's personal accounts. This system generated detailed electronic records that revealed the true destinations of company money, despite Derek's efforts to disguise the transactions. The most damaging evidence came from Derek's attempt to hack my email account and send fake messages that would frame me for embezzlement. Derek's amateur understanding of computer security led him to use his own internet connection and devices for this operation, creating an electronic trail that definitively linked him to the fabricated evidence he had used to destroy my reputation. Josh's digital forensics analysis could prove not only that the messages were fake, but that Derek had created them using his own computer equipment. As our investigation neared completion, I realized Derek's biggest miscalculation was underestimating how much his own greed would accelerate his criminal timeline. Derek's plan required patience and restraint to avoid detection, but his increasing success made him bold and careless. Derek was stealing larger amounts more frequently, creating more evidence and taking greater risks because he believed his previous manipulation had eliminated any threat of discovery. Josh and I spent weeks organizing our evidence into a presentation that would overwhelm Derek's defenses and convince Dad of the truth, despite months of conditioning that portrayed me as unreliable and vindictive. We needed documentation so comprehensive and professionally analyzed that even Derek's manipulative skills could not explain away or rationalize the scope of his criminal enterprise. The moment of confrontation was approaching, and I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread about finally revealing the truth that would destroy Derek's carefully constructed fiction while potentially saving Dad from criminal charges he did not deserve. 6 months of exile and investigation had prepared me for this confrontation, but I still worried that Derek's psychological hold over Dad might prove stronger than even irrefutable evidence of criminal fraud. The phone call that would eventually reach me in the middle of the night began with Grandview Resort's environmental consultant, Dr. Sarah Martinez, attempting to contact Jessica about critical foundation design errors that threatened both project viability and regulatory compliance. What she discovered launched a cascade of revelations that would destroy not only the $12 million contract, but Brennan Construction's reputation and financial stability. Dr. Martinez's environmental impact assessment revealed that Jessica's revised construction plans violated 6 separate federal regulations protecting wetland ecosystems and wildlife habitats. The accelerated timeline eliminated mandatory environmental monitoring periods required by the Environmental Protection Agency. The foundation modifications threatened drainage patterns that supported protected species breeding grounds. Most catastrophically, the simplified excavation procedures would disturb soil layers containing potential archaeological artifacts without proper survey and documentation. The revised plans submitted by Ms. Brennan demonstrate complete disregard for environmental regulations that carry criminal penalties for violations. Dr. Martinez documented in her report to Grandview's development team, implementation of these procedures would result in immediate project shutdown, substantial fines, and potential prosecution for environmental crimes. When Michael Thompson attempted to discuss these concerns with Jessica, her response revealed the depth of her arrogance and ignorance about construction industry requirements. Rather than acknowledging the problems and working toward solutions, she accused Grandview of creating obstacles through excessive environmental sensitivity and outdated regulatory interpretations. Modern construction practices have evolved beyond these restrictive approaches, Jessica argued during what became their final phone conversation. Brennan Construction can deliver superior results by focusing on efficiency rather than bureaucratic compliance that adds unnecessary costs and delays. Her dismissive attitude toward federal environmental regulations convinced Grandview's leadership that Brennan Construction posed unacceptable legal and financial risks. The decision to terminate negotiations became inevitable when Jessica refused to acknowledge that her promises violated federal law and engineering principles. The contract termination notification arrived with penalty clauses that Jessica had never bothered to read during her enthusiastic renegotiation process. The original agreement I had negotiated included standard provisions, protecting both parties from unreasonable damages in case of termination. Jessica's revised contract imposed $3 million in penalties for any contractor who failed to meet promised timelines or specifications. These penalties reflected Jessica's confident assurances that Brennan Construction could exceed all previous performance standards through her superior management and innovative approaches. She had essentially guaranteed impossible results while accepting financial liability for inevitable failure. The immediate financial impact threatened Brennan Construction's survival. The $3 million penalty exceeded available cash reserves and required immediate payment according to contract terms Jessica had signed without legal consultation. Bank loans guaranteed against company assets became vulnerable to accelerated collection procedures if Brennan Construction defaulted on penalty payments. Employee panic began spreading as word about the Grandview disaster reached project teams and administrative staff. Subcontractors demanded guaranteed payments before continuing work on existing projects. Material suppliers implemented cash-only policies for future orders. The company's credit rating plummeted as financial institutions learned about potential bankruptcy risks. Dad's initial response involved desperate attempts to salvage the Grandview relationship through personal appeals to Michael Thompson and promises that Jessica's errors would be corrected immediately. His phone calls were politely declined as Grandview's legal team advised against any communication that might complicate their own liability protection. The revelation that destroyed Dad's remaining confidence in Jessica's leadership came through a phone call from Dr. Patricia Williams at Riverside Medical Center. Their monthly board meeting had addressed concerning delays and cost overruns on the expansion project, leading to questions about project management changes and contractor reliability. Dr. Williams specifically asked to speak with Jayce about timeline adjustments for the equipment installation phase. Jessica reluctantly informed Dad. When I explained that he was no longer available due to personal issues, she mentioned that another contractor had approached them about completing the project with Jayce as project manager. The implications were unmistakable. Clients valued my relationships and expertise enough to consider changing contractors to work with me personally. Jessica's inherited position commanded no respect or loyalty from the clients whose trust and satisfaction determined company success. Worse discoveries awaited Dad as he investigated the full scope of problems that Jessica had hidden or minimized during her leadership tenure. The downtown office renovation costs had exceeded budget estimates by 60%. Safety violations and penalty fees totaled $37,000. 3 additional employees had submitted resignation notices, citing concerns about management competence and job security. The final devastating revelation emerged when Dad reviewed contract documentation for recent projects. Jessica's signature appeared on change orders for the Riverside Medical Center expansion that authorized work modifications I had never approved or recommended. The forgeries were clumsy but legally binding, creating potential liability for fraud and breach of contract. She forged my name on documents authorizing $15,000 in additional concrete work. I learned later from Carol Thompson, who had discovered the falsified paperwork before her own departure. The medical center never requested those modifications, and the work doesn't meet their specifications for future expansion capabilities. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. Equipment payments were 60 days overdue, with repossession notices pending. Most critically, the Grandview penalty payment deadline approached, with no possible sources for the required $3 million. Dad's midnight phone call represented his last hope for avoiding complete disaster and preserving some remnant of the business his father had built through decades of honest work and professional integrity. The silence that followed my response to Dad's desperate plea stretched for nearly 30 seconds while he processed the reality that I would not rescue the company from Jessica's catastrophic mismanagement. When he finally spoke again, his voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had finally understood the full consequences of his favoritism and poor judgment. Jayce, please reconsider. This is your grandfather's legacy, your family's business. We can work out arrangements that recognize your contributions and give you the authority you deserve. His words revealed how completely he had missed the fundamental issues that made reconciliation impossible. The authority I deserve was earned through 7 years of successful project management, client relationship development, and business growth. I responded with careful control over my emotions. When you gave Jessica 100% ownership and dismissed my contributions as technical expertise, you made your values clear. Those values haven't changed because her incompetence created consequences you didn't anticipate. Dad's attempts at negotiation became increasingly desperate as our conversation continued. He offered partnership structures that would give me 51% ownership and complete operational control. He promised to remove Jessica from all management responsibilities and limit her involvement to administrative oversight. He suggested compensation packages that included retroactive recognition for contracts I had secured and relationships I had developed. Each offer demonstrated his fundamental misunderstanding of why his original decision was unforgivable and irreversible. Trust, respect, and family loyalty couldn't be restored through legal documents or financial arrangements. 7 years of dedicated service meant nothing to him, until Jessica's failures threatened his retirement security and financial stability. You chose Jessica over merit, competence, and fairness. I explained. Your current problems result from that choice. The solution isn't negotiating better terms with me. It's accepting responsibility for decisions that prioritized family politics over business success. The conversation ended with Dad's recognition that I would not return under any circumstances. His angry frustration gradually transformed into defeated acceptance as he realized that Brennan Construction's survival depended entirely on Jessica's ability to correct problems that exceeded her qualifications and experience. During the following weeks, reports about the company's rapid decline reached me through industry contacts who expressed sympathy for my family's situation, while confirming that I had made the right decision by leaving. The remaining employees began submitting resignations as uncertainty about payroll and job security became unbearable. Rick Patterson, our electrical foreman, accepted a position with another contractor, rather than risk unpaid wages and incomplete projects that would damage his professional reputation. Administrative assistant Linda Rodriguez found employment with a property management company that offered stable income and growth opportunities. Within 6 weeks of the Grandview disaster, only Jessica and 2 part-time workers remained to handle ongoing projects and administrative responsibilities. The client cancellations accelerated as word spread about Brennan Construction's financial difficulties and management problems. The suburban office complex project worth $700,000 was terminated when the developer learned about the Grandview penalties and questioned the company's ability to complete contracted work. 2 residential renovation clients demanded return of deposit payments rather than risk project abandonment. Mom's intervention came through a phone call that revealed her growing understanding of how Dad's favoritism had destroyed both business relationships and family bonds. Her voice carried genuine remorse as she acknowledged the unfairness of Jessica's inheritance and the dismissive treatment I had endured. "I should have spoken up during the family meeting when your father announced his succession plan," she admitted. "I knew Jessica wasn't prepared for business leadership, but I thought family unity was more important than individual fairness. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Her apology meant more than Dad's desperate negotiation attempts, because it included acknowledgement of mistakes and acceptance of responsibility for remaining silent when her voice could have influenced the discussion. However, apologies couldn't repair damage that extended beyond hurt feelings into professional reputation and career development. Jessica's breakdown occurred during a confrontation with Dad about the mounting financial crisis and her inability to manage basic operational requirements. Former employees described hearing shouting matches through closed office doors as reality finally penetrated her confidence and entitlement. She blamed everyone except herself for the problems. Danny Martinez reported after running into Jessica at a local restaurant. According to her version, "You sabotaged client relationships before leaving. The employees were disloyal and incompetent, and the clients had unreasonable expectations that no contractor could meet." Her refusal to accept responsibility for obvious mistakes and poor decisions confirmed that personal growth and learning remained beyond her capacity. The woman who had inherited everything through family connections would never develop the accountability and professional integrity that sustained successful business operations. My success at Rocky Mountain Development provided an interesting contrast to Brennan Construction's collapse. Within 4 months of joining the company, I had secured 2 major contracts worth a combined total of $6 million through relationships and reputation I had developed throughout my career. The promotion to partner reflected both my individual contributions and the company's recognition that experienced project managers were essential for sustainable growth. The sustainable construction practices I had researched and promoted at Brennan Construction found enthusiastic support at Rocky Mountain Development. Their commitment to environmental responsibility and innovative building techniques aligned with industry trends that Jessica had dismissed as unnecessary complications. My expertise in green building certifications and renewable energy integration became valuable assets for clients seeking environmentally conscious construction solutions. The phone call that changed everything arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing blueprints for a mixed-use development near downtown Denver. Michael Thompson from Grandview Resort reached out directly to discuss their continued interest in the mountain resort project and their disappointment about the situation with Brennan Construction. "We were impressed by your environmental compliance planning and project management approach during the original negotiations," Michael explained. "Rather than searching for another contractor to develop new relationships, we'd prefer working with you if you could bring the project to your current company or establish your own construction business." The $12 million contract that Jessica had lost through incompetence and arrogance was being offered directly to me, along with recognition that my expertise and professionalism were the assets Grandview truly valued. The irony was perfect. Jessica's inheritance meant nothing, while my earned reputation opened opportunities that exceeded anything Brennan Construction had ever achieved. The offer required careful consideration of legal implications, partnership arrangements with Rocky Mountain Development, and timeline coordination that would determine project feasibility. However, the fundamental message was unmistakable. Merit, competence, and professional relationships created value that family connections and inherited positions could never provide. Success requires competence, dedication, and character traits that can't be given, but must be developed through experience and commitment to excellence. Family relationships matter, but they shouldn't override fairness, honesty, and recognition of individual contributions. Love and loyalty can coexist with accountability and realistic evaluation of abilities and performance. The healthiest families celebrate individual achievements while maintaining supportive relationships that encourage growth and learning. Most importantly, standing up for your worth and refusing to accept unfair treatment isn't selfish or disloyal. Self-respect and professional integrity create foundation for relationships and opportunities that reflect your true value rather than other people's limitations or prejudices. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. The project featured innovative, sustainable building techniques, exceeded environmental protection standards, and finished ahead of schedule despite complex regulatory requirements that Jessica had dismissed as unnecessary obstacles. 3 industry publications featured articles about the project's environmental achievements and innovative construction methods. The Colorado Construction Association invited me to speak at their annual conference about sustainable building practices and regulatory compliance strategies. Most satisfying, the project generated referrals from other developers interested in environmentally responsible construction that reflected modern values and regulatory requirements. Meanwhile, Brennan Construction's bankruptcy filing became official when the company couldn't meet basic operational expenses or satisfy the Grandview penalty obligations. Dad's retirement savings disappeared into legal fees and debt payments that provided no possibility of business recovery. The equipment auction barely covered outstanding loan balances while generating proceeds insufficient for creditor settlements. Jessica's employment search revealed the harsh reality of job markets that valued competence over connections. Her business degree and family business experience meant nothing to employers who required proven results rather than academic credentials. The construction industry specifically avoided hiring someone whose mismanagement had destroyed a successful company and endangered employee livelihoods. Her eventual employment with a retail marketing firm involved entry-level responsibilities that paid $37,000 annually, significantly less than the project managers and skilled trades workers she had supervised at Brennan Construction. The humbling experience of job interviews, performance evaluations, and supervision by people she had previously considered subordinates provided education that her business school program had never included. The personal growth Jessica experienced through professional failure included recognition of mistakes she had previously blamed on others. During a chance encounter at a coffee shop near downtown Denver, she approached me with genuine humility rather than the entitlement and condescension that had characterized her behavior during her brief leadership tenure. "I owe you an apology for how I handled the business transition and my treatment of your contributions," she said, her voice carrying embarrassment and regret that seemed authentic. "I thought my education and enthusiasm could substitute for your experience and relationships. I was wrong about everything, and I'm sorry." Her acknowledgement couldn't repair the damage to family relationships or restore the business that 3 generations had built through honest work and professional integrity. However, it represented personal accountability and learning that suggested she might eventually develop the character traits necessary for genuine success rather than inherited privilege. Dad's attempt at reconciliation came through Mom, who served as intermediary for conversations he couldn't initiate directly. His pride had been shattered along with his business, but his understanding of fairness and merit had finally developed through painful experience with the consequences of favoritism and poor judgment. "Your father knows he made terrible mistakes," Mom explained during one of our regular lunch meetings that had restored our relationship. "He understands that you earned everything you achieved and that Jessica received opportunities she didn't deserve. He wants to apologize, but he doesn't know if you're willing to listen." The eventual conversation with Dad took place at the same coffee shop where Grandpa had first shared his dreams about building a construction company that would provide honest work and fair treatment for employees and clients. Dad's apology included full acceptance of responsibility for decisions that destroyed both business success and family relationships. "I convinced myself that family unity mattered more than individual fairness," he admitted. "I thought Jessica's potential was more important than your proven abilities. Everything that happened afterward was my fault, and I'm sorry." His recognition of mistakes represented personal growth that came too late to save the business, but provided foundation for rebuilding family relationships based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy and favoritism. Our conversations gradually restored connection while maintaining clear boundaries about professional independence and career decisions. The opportunity that provided perfect closure to this chapter of my life emerged when Brennan Construction's bankruptcy auction included the company name, client list, and remaining operational assets. The auctioneer's announcement that these assets would be sold to the highest bidder created an unexpected possibility for reclaiming the legacy that family politics had nearly destroyed. Rocky Mountain Development supported my proposal to establish a subsidiary company that would purchase Brennan Construction's assets and continue serving clients who valued quality construction and environmental responsibility. The financial arrangements required personal investment that demonstrated commitment while providing partnership structure that shared both risks and rewards fairly. Brennan Construction meant something in this community before it was destroyed by poor management. I explained to my new partners. The name represents 3 generations of honest work and professional integrity. Those values deserve continuation rather than abandonment. The successful bid gave me ownership of the company name, client relationships, and equipment that represented my grandfather's legacy and my own 7 years of dedicated service. The new Brennan Construction would operate as a subsidiary of Rocky Mountain Development, combining established reputation with modern resources and sustainable practices that reflected industry leadership rather than inherited privilege. The first project completed under the restored company name involved renovation of a community center that served low-income families in Northeast Denver. The work honored Grandpa's commitment to projects that strengthened communities while showcasing construction techniques and materials that demonstrated environmental responsibility and social consciousness. Standing in the completed community center, surrounded by families whose children would benefit from renovated facilities and improved safety features, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from work that creates lasting value rather than temporary profits. This was what Grandpa had envisioned when he started the company. Construction that served communities and reflected values that extended beyond financial success. The life lesson that emerged from this experience centered on the fundamental importance of merit, accountability, and earned respect, rather than inherited privilege or family connections. Success requires competence, dedication, and character traits that can't be given but must be developed through experience and commitment to excellence. Family relationships matter, but they shouldn't override fairness, honesty, and recognition of individual contributions. Love and loyalty can coexist with accountability and realistic evaluation of abilities and performance. The healthiest families celebrate individual achievements while maintaining supportive relationships that encourage growth and learning. Most importantly, standing up for your worth and refusing to accept unfair treatment isn't selfish or disloyal. Self-respect and professional integrity create foundation for relationships and opportunities that reflect your true value rather than other people's limitations or prejudices. The construction industry taught me that solid foundations support everything built upon them. Personal integrity provides the same foundation for life decisions, family relationships, and professional success. When you build on solid ground with quality materials and careful attention to detail, what you create will last long after temporary challenges and setbacks are forgotten. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a situation where family favoritism or workplace politics threatened to undermine your achievements and self-worth? How did you handle the choice between accepting unfair treatment and standing up for what you deserved? Share your story in the comments below because your experience might help someone else navigate similar challenges with courage and wisdom. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of situations in your own life, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself, overcoming family challenges, and finding success through persistence and integrity. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from understanding that merit and character matter more than connections and inherited privilege. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it encourages you to value your own worth and never settle for treatment that doesn't reflect your contributions and capabilities. Remember that true success comes from building something meaningful through your own efforts, not from accepting whatever others decide you deserve.